Everybody. So today we'll cover body organization, first part of the fundamental to anatomy and physiology. So that means you guys are learning two things, A and P. And I think it's better if you learn both anatomy and physiology together. All right, we'll talk about a bunch of stuff. We'll explain it from history. We'll go from simplest to complex structure. So we'll start with the subatomic particles. So once we get to chemistry, I'll explain that a little bit more. Types of tissue, so there's only 4 types. Some terminology. So I think only one student said they didn't have Med 100 yet. So what I recommend is find some videos, basic terminology, and what you want to do is focus on the med terms for that body system. So try to find some videos that's focusing on just the skeletal system or just the muscular system. That'll help you out. Anatomical position, so we can describe it. Chemistry, as mentioned. The cell, so if you took biology in high school, they'll help you out. If you took that chemistry in high school, it'll help. Then we'll talk about cell division. We'll get into cancer a little bit. DNA fingerprinting, which is the genetics. All right, anatomy. So anatomy, so tomy from Med 100 means to, what's a tomy? No, ology is a study. A tomy is to cut. So what they did was they cut up the body to study it. So they called it anatomy, right? Learning of the body. So that is just what that part is, where it's at. The physiology is what it does, right? So this is anatomy, what it is, where it's at. Physiology, okay, now I know where it is, what's it's called, what does it do, right? That's the two main things, and we'll learn them together. Atom. So the smallest substance, or the smallest thing that we can divide a substance into, is the atomic level. So below that you have subatomic particles. Have you guys heard of an electron? Right? So an electron. How about a proton? All right. And neutron? Yeah, so you guys are familiar with those terms. So we'll talk more about those in chemistry, and we talk about pH. All right, we put atoms together. What do they make? Molecules, right? For our body, we have these little parts called organs. But in a cell, those little parts are called organelles, right? The organs of the cell. So if we have a bunch of molecules that kind of do the same thing, right, have the same kind of function, then we call that the organelle. And then we'll talk more about those when we talk about the cell. Simplest living structure is the cell itself. And then if we have a bunch of cells that kind of do the same thing, like all your liver cells are kind of similar, they kind of do the same thing. So we call that tissue. If we have more than one tissue type kind of organized in one function, then that is an organ. Once you have multiple organs, like the heart with the blood vessels, then you have a system. So the cardiovascular system, multiple organs together. And then all of our body systems, the skin, bones, muscles, endocrine, reproductive system, all together creates the complete organism. So just know the organization level from subatomic all the way down to the complete organism. 4 types of tissue. That's it. There's only 4. Right. So let's do the easy ones first. Right. So nerves, everyone's familiar with what nerves are, right? So they send signals. That's all they do. So they send signals to the brain, or they send signals away from the brain. So everyone's familiar with nervous. Muscles. Everyone's familiar with muscle tissue, right? So 3 types. There's the stuff that you can control. So if you want to move, you can move your skeletal muscle. Your organs, those are your visceral muscle, aka smooth. And then the third type is in your heart. All right, so that takes care of 2 of the tissue types. Let's take a look at epithelial. What does the prefix epi mean? Above, right? Like an earthquake, if you have an epicenter, it's above where the actual earthquake happened. So epithelial makes they make a separation. So they're the top covering. So your skin and glands, your hair, that's all epithelial tissue. You also have a tube from mouth to what's the end called? The anus, right? So lining the inside of that tube, and that's your esophagus, stomach, small intestine, large intestine, rectum, is also epithelial tissue, right? So creating the border on the outside of your body and creating the border on the inside of your body, epithelial, including your gland. So last is the most difficult to understand, is connective tissue, because it's mostly everything else. So if you eliminate it by, if it's not nervous tissue, if it's not muscle, and if it doesn't make a border, like an outside border or an inside border, then it has to be connective tissue. So bone, cartilage, fat, blood, everything else that's not listed under skin, muscles, or nerves is going to be connective tissue. Body systems. So we have our skin, integumentary system. So that's the skin, also the lining of the intestines. Bones, we mentioned 206. That's average. Some people have more bones, some people have less. Muscles, I think there's 600 plus muscles. What is the lymphatic system? You guys heard of lymphoma, right? So that's cancer of the lymphatic system. Well, what's the lymphatic system? Yeah. So that's part of it, but what does it do? So you got the anatomy part down. The physiology is, yeah. So we filter out your water in your body at the same time. Let's filter it out for any bacteria or viruses. So it's part of your fluid system and your immune system. Respiratory is the lungs, breathing, right? So that's going to help us control our O2 and CO2 levels, oxygen and carbon dioxide. Digestive system, straightforward, right? Break down food, absorb food, get rid of waste. Nerves, so that's your brain, brain stem, and all the nerves peripherally. What's the endocrine system? What does endo mean? Within, right? So this is your hormone system. So crine means to secrete. Endo means within. When we release hormones, we secrete them within our body. So that's the endocrine system. Cardiovascular system, straightforward. Urinary system. So that is pretty much your excretory system. So the liver will break stuff down, put it in the blood, and what filters out the blood? Your kidneys. Right? So that's how we absorb things. Our digestive system absorbs things in the blood. The liver changes them, breaks them down, puts it back in the blood, and the kidney filters out the waste. And then lastly, male and female reproductive system. All right, so there's only one student from yesterday that I polled that has not taken medical terminology. So medical terminology is based on Latin or Greek. So I joked about it yesterday. If you speak Spanish, it's a Latin-based language. So a lot of those enunciations will be similar. So you have a word root. So for example, cardi is the word root for heart. And a lot of times to make it easier to pronounce, we might add an O at the end. Right? So that O there is just for connecting. Suffix come at the end. So example, ology. Sorry, just ology is the study of. Prefix come at the beginning. So let's say we use that epi, right? So to combine medical terms, prefixes never use that combining vowel. So you just add the prefix at the beginning. So I have epi. So that's a prefix. Next usually is the word root. So our word root is cardio. So I have epi, cardi, right? And then we have our suffix. Now, we only use the O if the suffix starts with a consonant. If the suffix starts with a vowel, you don't need to use the O. So in this case, our suffix is ology. There's an O anyway. We'll add in that O. So here we have epicardiology. And to define medical terms, we define the suffix first, then we go back to the prefix, and then lastly, we define the word root. So you have to go kind of backwards. So if I define epicardiologist or cardiology, it would be the study of the area above the heart. So that's how you would define medical words and build them. Anatomical positions. If I said the word quadrants, how many parts do you think of when I say quadrants? Very good. So anytime you hear the word quadrants, that's going to be 4 parts. So when you identify quadrants, make sure you identify left or right first. So in anatomy, we're always assuming we're looking at the patient in anatomical position. So everybody stand up and get in anatomical position. That picture might help you. So stand up, anatomical position. All right, palms forward, palms back, or palms to the side? Palms forward, right? So you guys are right. So you always want to stand palm forward. Okay, now you might have to step into the aisleway a little bit. Now flex every muscle in your body. So that's starting anatomical position. Oh, you got to flex your legs too. How about your back? How about your neck? How about your toes? Curl everything. Go. Do it. Do it. No, not stretch. You got to flex. That means you got to make every angle smaller. So here's starting position. Okay? This is starting anatomical position. So if you flex everything, all the bones get closer together. You have to go all the way down, all the way up on your toes. Right? That's completely flexed position. So you usually never see that. But for quadrants, back to quadrants, identify left or right first. You always want to identify left or right. So if we're looking at the patient, what side is this right here on this patient? What side is that on that patient? Is that left or right? Looking at him anatomically.
Right.
It's going to be the right side. And then this would be the left side. So always assume every image you see is in anatomical position unless they tell you otherwise. And then we'll get into those different positions. So for quadrants, we have left or right. Identify that first, and then identify upper or lower, and then say the word quadrant. Right? Do not say upper right quadrant. Say right upper quadrant. So when you enter stuff in exams, make sure you do R, U, Q, right? So identify left or right first, then up or down. So, which quadrant is your gallbladder in? Gallbladder.
Right.
So right behind the liver, here it is, that little green thing. That's the gallbladder. So very good. Right upper. Where is ascending colon. Where does poop go up? So poop goes up here. Yeah. Right lower. Poop goes up this side, then goes over. What comes up must come down. So where is the descending colon? Left lower. Where's your spleen? What is the spleen? So it's part of your lymphatic system. So right off your stomach, right here on the left upper side, that is your spleen. So if I say the word quadrant, what does that equal? 4. If I say the word region, what does that equal? How many? That's going to equal to 9. Or if I say sections, that's going to be 9. So now we're going to divide the abdomen into 9 parts. Gaster. What's gaster? What's the word root gaster? Stomach, right? So above the stomach, so we know the prefix for above, right? Epi. So we have the stomach in the middle, right? So above the stomach is the epigastric. The word for below, or the prefix for below, is hypo. So below the stomach is the hypogastric. So here we got epigastric, hypogastric. In the center is the umbilical cord. So they call that the umbilical region, the umbilicus. All right, that takes care of 3 of them. Lower back. What are the bones in the lower back called? You guys ever heard of the word lumbar? All right. So we have the right lumbar region, your lower back, and then the left lumbar region. Your hip pointers. Right? So that hip pointer, that part of the hip bone, the coxal bone, is actually called the iliac. So the iliac crest. So we have the right iliac and the left iliac. The old term was inguinal, and that was for males, because males have an inguinal canal. So they changed it to a term that is unisex. Iliac. Right iliac, left iliac. And that just leaves the hypochondriatic. So what is chondra? What's chondro? That's cartilage. So all this white stuff here on the rib cage, that's all cartilage. So below the cartilage, so on the right side, below the cartilage on the left side. So right hypochondriatic and left hypochondriatic region. All right, well, let's name the region. Where is your pancreas? What is the pancreas? Well, it's right behind the stomach. So that would be what region?
Left upper?
No, I'm circling it right now. Region. So we want 9, not quadrants. You're giving me quadrants. Epigastric. So your stomach's right here. Behind it is the pancreas. Where is the bladder? Yeah, the bladder is right around here. Now you know where the spleen is. What region is it in? Yep, right off the stomach right here. Where does poop go up? Right lumbar region, right? So there's your ascending colon. Poop goes over, and then poop goes down. So when people say I got a stomach ache, yeah. Cavity. If I say the word major body cavity, there's only 2, right? Dorsal and ventral. So where's the dorsal fin on a shark? On its back. Very good. So the back cavity, the big one, is the dorsal cavity. It's split into 2 parts. So this is the easier one, where the brain is, the cranial, and where the spinal cord is. The next major one is, so if dorsal means back, ventral means front. Very good. So this one is the one that's more complex, and it's divided into more sections. So we divide it into the thoracic cavity and the abdominal pelvic cavity. What dividing it is a physical barrier called the diaphragm. What's the diaphragm used for?
Speaking.
That's breathing. That's your muscle of breathing. Right? Chemistry. So bonds we got to be familiar with. So we got atoms. They come together. They build molecules. So for our building blocks of carbohydrates, you guys know what carbs are? What are carbs? Bread, pasta. So what's bread and pasta made out of? What are the subunits? Sugar, right? So if you eat a potato, what does your body break it down into? Sugar. If you eat bread, what does your body break it down into? Sugar. So all your carbs, pasta turns into sugar. So the building blocks of carbs are sugar. Lipids, those are your fats. We have different types of fats. We have like cholesterol. We have fatty acids. So you guys heard of glycerides, triglycerides, monoglycerides, diglycerides? Right? So that's how fats are carried out in our body. How about bad fats? Low density lipoproteins, high density lipoproteins. Proteins. So that's going to be your muscles, right? So what are the building blocks of protein? They're amino acids. Right? So we got about 20 of those. We put them together in a certain chain in a certain way, and then it makes all of our proteins. And lastly, nucleic acid. Where in the cell will you find nucleic acids? Yeah, in the nucleus. So that's your DNA and RNA material. Very important structure of the cell is the cell membrane. So it's made out of fats, lipids. Does oil and water mix? No. So inside the cell, we have a bunch of water. Outside the cell, we have a bunch of water. But since the cell membrane is made out of fat, can I make my way through? No. And if I have water on the inside, can I make my way out? No. So it keeps what's inside the cell inside, and it keeps what's outside the cell outside. The organs of the cells are called organelles. And then the soup that all the organelles are in is just called the cytoplasm. Inside the center, we have a nucleus. So for us, all of our DNA is inside here. And if we want to send the message out, we got to change it into RNA. How many chromosomes do you have in each of your cells? 4? 6? Alright, so here's a sperm. Here's an egg. How many chromosomes is in a sperm? Huh? No, chromosomes. So every cell in your body has 46. Mom gave you 23 and dad gave you 23. So what's that thing called? 23andMe? That's why. They're testing your chromosomes. So every cell in your body has a complete 46 count, but your sperm and egg only has half because you get half from your mom, half from your dad. Diffusion. High to low. Things always go from high concentration to low. For example, if I sprayed some perfume in the front of the room or cologne in the front of the room, it's highly concentrated in that area, but I do nothing, right? And I just wait. A few minutes later, somebody in the back will be able to smell it. So things always diffuse from high concentration to low, and that requires no energy. osmosis. You guys ever heard of that? Osmosis, Joe? So we have a membrane, we have water, and osmosis is which way does the water go past the membrane. And we can manipulate which way water goes. Every time you urinate, well, it's a form of filtration. Right? So that's done through pressure. So in your kidneys, you have blood vessels that have a bunch of holes in it. And the blood pressure will force certain things through the holes of the blood vessel. We collect it, and that becomes your urine. So filtration is always through some kind of pressure. In this case, blood pressure. Active transport. That's the opposite of diffusion. So instead of going from high to low, we're going from low to high. So I sprayed that cologne, that perfume, but the person in the back of the room is actually allergic to it. So I have to kick my bottle and go around the room and put those molecules back in the bottle. Is that going to take effort? It's going to take energy? Definitely so. So that's going to require energy. And your body, that's all it does. Potassium on the inside. We have high potassium on the inside because your body's pumping potassium into every cell. At the same time, your body's pumping sodium outside the body. So you're pumping potassium in, sodium out, all day long, every cell in your body. Does that require energy? Yeah, you got to eat. Cell division. When a cell gets big enough, it needs to divide. So how many chromosomes does a cell have in your body? 46. But if I'm going to copy myself, I need to copy my DNA first, right? So the first step of cell division is I got to copy all my DNA. Once I copy my DNA, then I can divide into two identical clones, right? So your skin cell, all it's doing every day is just copying itself and dividing. Liver cells, every cell in your body except most of your nervous system. So now we have 46 in each. Right? So prophase is when you see the chromosomes, right? Metaphase is when the chromosomes line up right at the center of the cell. So prophase is when you start seeing the chromosomes. Mostly you don't see the chromosomes. That's prophase. Metaphase, that's when the chromosomes that are copied, they line up. So they're pairs, so that's why it looks like an X. In anaphase, those chromosomes are being pulled apart to one end each. So there's actually string that physically pull the chromosome apart in anaphase. This is anaphase. And then in telophase, that's when the cell will start to split apart. Now I got my DNA and my other DNA. Now telophase, the cells will start pinching off and becoming two cells. So that is telophase. How many chromosomes does your sperm and egg have? 23. So that process is called meiosis. Meiosis, we start with 46, we end with 46 each. In meiosis, guess what? We start with 46 and then we end up with 23 each. Right? So that'll make your sperm and egg. All right, genetic techniques. So we're able to sequence DNA. There's only 4 bases in DNA. A, C, T, G. And that's it. So if we know one side, we know the other. Right? A always pairs with T. C always pair with G. So if I have T on one side, what would be on the other side? A. If I have G on one side, what would be on the other side? So we only need single strand to copy. And what we do here in this chain reaction is we heat it up. So DNA used to be in pairs. Now it's single. If it's single, we can copy. So now we copy. And what do? Since it's a chain reaction, we repeat. We reheat it. Now it breaks apart into 4. Now it can be copied. So in like criminal cases where they only have a little bit of DNA, this is how they make more of that DNA. They just copy it, copy it. So we'll use that to then figure out your exact sequence. So you have an A. What's your next base pair? C. What's your next base pair? T. So if you ever see these dots here, that's the actual DNA. And that's how they're reading A, C, T, G, A, G, G, A, T, C, G. So from your DNA code, will then express all of your genes. So in order to make proteins, we have to have DNA, RNA. Genetic diseases. So 23, trisomal 23. So if a chromosome didn't split apart during meiosis, some people have an extra chromosome. So they'll have 47. Sorry, trisomal 21. So on the 21st chromosome, if you have 3 copies, then that's Down syndrome. Right? So you just have an extra chromosome that didn't split. Other genetic diseases. So for albinism, you just don't have the genes to make pigment colors in your skin. So your eyes are pink, your skin is light, your hair is white. We'll just hemophilia. So that's your inability. You don't have the genes to make a clotting factor. So it's usually factor 9 or factor 8 that people are missing. There's 13 different clotting factors, 13 steps that need to happen for a clot to form. If you're missing one of those steps, you don't make blood clots. PKU, you cannot break down certain proteins. So NutraSweet, you can't break that down. It'll just build up and become toxic to you. So a lot of your diseases or conditions, disorders, is actually a genetic condition. And nowadays we can use gene therapy to fix your genes before you're born, and now they're doing it after and even as an adult. All right, so that was a snapshot of body organization. So of course, read the chapter in your book, and we will do subsequent OLI modules online for body organization.